right, ladies and gentlemen, I gather that we're ready to start. The gods of live streaming have bestowed blessings upon us. So now I would like to invite Director General of TERI, Dr. Ajay Mathur, to the dais, and he is going to introduce our keynote address, Professor Jeffrey Sachs.
A very good morning to all of you, and especially to Professor Jeffrey Sachs. There you are. Thank you very much for joining us. It must be midnight there, so apologies for keeping you up so late, but I can't tell you how delighted we are that you could join us this time through video. It's always an honor to have you with us. I don't know whether this audience needs an introduction to you, to the person Martin called the Prince of Reasoned Arguments. As far as I'm concerned, Professor Sachs is probably one of the most influential thinkers and doers and advocates related to sustainable development in the world. Whether it is as an advocate for the Sustainable Development Goals, where he's the UN Secretary General's, I would think, his think tank, as well as his main advocate outside, whether it is through the writings that he does, whether it is through his advice to governments, whether it is through the organization that he has created, through all of these, Professor Sachs thinks, lives, and interacts in a life that is promoting sustainable development. Professor Sachs, we are not going to keep you too long, but we would very much like you to share your thoughts with us. Over to you.
Thank you very much, and thank you. It's really a profound honor always to be with you and to have a chance to participate in this annual summit, which I regard as one of the most important meetings in the whole world. You know, I've been in person with you, I think, for at least 10 of these 15 years, and I hope that next year I'll be back in person again with you. This year it just proved to be impossible, largely because of the UN schedule, for me to be in Delhi personally, but with the wonders of video conferencing and with the apologies of a slight delay, I'm absolutely thrilled that I have a chance to speak with you. You know, we are at a historic moment, and India is playing an absolutely vital role in this moment. We are lucky that we're at a historic moment when we can brainstorm together. This week, the Paris Climate Agreement has gone into effect because the requisite 55% of countries covering 55% of global emissions has now ratified the agreement reached last year. India and the European Union simultaneously have put the world over the top. And this objective is a core part of the complex agenda, of course, that we've been discussing in Delhi at this important summit for years. But now, for the first time, we have an operational opportunity to move in an effective manner. It's 1 year since the Sustainable Development Goals overall were adopted, and less than a year since the Paris Climate Agreement was first adopted, but is already in effect. And it's a good time for us to therefore discuss the practicalities of what we have put ourselves to. You know, when the world adopted the Sustainable Development Goals, the 193 member states of the United Nations agreed on a basic concept. And that concept is that we should aim for an improved kind of economic development, something new, something beyond what we measure directly by our gross national product, by our increases of output per capita. And that is that we should aim for an economic development that is socially inclusive and environmentally sustainable, for a quality path of economic development. And India is probably just at this crucial crossroads where the economic growth is now robust, but the challenges of making economic development that is simultaneously inclusive and sustainable is the paramount challenge. If one looks at the agreement that was reached a year ago in the Sustainable Development Goals, in my view, the world has agreed on some basic, correct, and important concepts. And that is that the substance of economic growth should be built on strong investments in people, quality investments in infrastructure, and strong protection of the natural environment. This is a huge challenge. And I would say that for India, this is a paramount test as well. If you look at what the content of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals call for, at the core is the universality of access to the basic needs and the basic investments in human capital that can ensure the inclusivity of economic development, and a transformation of technology that ensures that that development is consistent with environmental sustainability. For India, it seems to me that SDGs 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 are all of tremendous importance and guidance. SDG 3 saying that there should be, as part of the core of economic development, universal access to health services. SDG 4, that there should be universal access to quality education from pre-K at least through skilled vocational education. SDG 5, that this universal access should engage girls as well as boys, men as well as women. SDG 6, that there should be access to safe water and sanitation for all of the population. SDG 7, that there should be universal access to modern energy services, electrification, and modern and safe cooking fuels for the entire population. It's as if, in fact, these goals were written for India's own priorities, since these are the goals that we've been talking about at the Delhi summit for the past 15 years. But the Sustainable Development Challenge is even tougher than that, unfortunately, and more urgent than that, because these objectives of investing broadly in human capital and in basic infrastructure needs need to be combined with the environmental imperatives. And these are the goals covered by SDGs 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15, all of great significance for India as well. SDG 11, calling for cities which will have to accommodate at least another 300 to 400 million Indians over the next 30 years, should also be safe, clean, healthful places to live. And of course, India's cities right now are, alas, beset by massive air pollution, water pollution, lack of green spaces, crowded, congested traffic, and many of the great challenges of mega urban areas in all parts of the world. SDG 12 calls on our cities to recycle wastes effectively and to stop the release of toxic substances by closing the circle of production so that today's wastes become inputs for production rather than releases into the environment. And this is obviously of paramount significance for India as well, because so much of India's environment is really hindered at this point by toxic chemical releases into the air and water. SDG 13, as you know, is the climate objective. The essence of it is the Paris Climate Agreement. And this is one of the most complicated challenges worldwide. And I always say that for India, perhaps India represents one of the toughest cases of all in the world, and that is to increase markedly the access to energy services, but to do so simultaneously reducing the emissions that are associated with those energy services to protect the climate. And since India is one of the countries most at risk of global warming, this is a double challenge because India desperately needs more energy services. At the same time, it desperately needs the world to take seriously the agreements reached in Paris to limit global warming and aim for well below 2 degrees Celsius in warming when we're already more than halfway to the limit that we have established. SDGs 14 and 15 complete that environmental mandate of protecting the marine environments, the oceans, and SDG 15, the terrestrial ecosystems, which in so many parts of India are already profoundly degraded, where habitat has been lost, and India's remarkable biodiversity is already pushed to the limits of survival for many, many species in India, and with great risks coming from further climate change. So I mention all of this because I regard this agenda as extraordinarily important and extraordinarily difficult at the same time. There's nothing easy about what we have agreed in the Sustainable Development Goals. And for huge countries like India and even relatively large countries like my own, the United States, finding ways to take these goals seriously and put them into operation is a profound challenge. I believe it's our biggest challenge in the world, even to have the attention and policy focus to take seriously what we have agreed and consistently carry it out in complex democratic political systems that have limited attention spans, short-term horizons, many urgencies that challenge the long-term agenda and that have a tendency to distract us from the importance of what we have agreed to do. Let me be clear, when I say how important this is for India or the United States or China or Europe, I can also say that no major region of the world right now is fully focused in a proper way on these objectives. In the United States, we're utterly distracted by a rather bizarre political process and a political system that is rather unresponsive to most of these deeper challenges. And I think the same is true in many parts of the world, that our attention span and ability to focus on these challenges is really a major question for us. Let me suggest a couple of points that I think are extremely important in the Indian context and in the US context, because I find the challenges quite similar in our countries, in fact. You know, I would say that there are two great aspects of success in being able to achieve a complex set of goals like the Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Climate Agreement. And in a way, both India and the United States are relatively well disposed in one of those, and I would say profoundly challenged in the other. On the one part, I would emphasize the technological challenges. Almost all of the Sustainable Development Goals require the application of cutting-edge technologies, especially advanced information technologies and what they enable for the mass delivery of high-quality health, education, infrastructure services, and for the deployment of advanced energy systems. In order for India or the United States to be able to enjoy a high-quality energy system that at the same time emits nearly zero greenhouse gas emissions, we're going to have to deploy advanced power grids, renewable energy systems, new materials technologies in a sophisticated way. I think one of the great joys of that reality is that India is, without question, one of the most ingenious and clever leaders in the deployment of information technologies. And we look to India for its contributions, not only in solving India's problems, but also in helping to solve problems in the rest of the developing world. India's advances in unique identification, in low-cost banking, in e-governance, and many of the other major breakthroughs that have been achieved in recent years, I think will serve India extremely well in introducing new and innovative approaches to succeed in the Sustainable Development Goals. This is one piece of the challenge. And I would say that one of the aspects of these new technologies is that we're going to have to invent our way forward. No longer will be sufficient to merely emulate the advanced countries. We're in a new era where achieving these goals is going to require wholly new delivery systems, wholly new technological approaches, new standards for transport, for power generation, for education, all building on the advances of information technology. That's the good stuff, because I feel comfortable that India can not only deploy these technologies, but be a world leader in them and use those technologies as a major source of India's own growth through exports the world over. And I see that in Africa, where Indian technologies are absolutely vital for Africa's development challenges at this stage. But the second part of this puzzle, I think, is a tougher one, and I want to reflect on it for a moment, and that is, how can our democratic systems, very complex and very short-term in general, take on such long-term, complicated problems as energy transformation, or quality education systems, or health for all? If you look at any of these problems, and let me take the energy challenge, for example, The real issue here is that what is required is a consistent plan of action carried out for decades rather than individual years, with a time horizon needed and a planning horizon far longer than any individual government. And we have found in the United States, and I think it's true in India as well, that even conceptualizing the energy challenge in a deep way, much less implementing it in a democratic environment driven by short-term consideration, has proved to be extraordinarily elusive. To this day, while the United States has talked boldly about the climate change agenda, we still lack even a basic framework for carrying out a long-term decarbonization of the US economy. And while India, fortunately, has talked boldly about its commitment to the climate agenda, we know that India is also, in the short term, committed to a massive buildup of coal-fired power, which run in a contrary direction to commitments on climate change. What's the problem? The problem here is finding the best way to look ahead, think ahead, and act on the time horizon that is outside the political business level. And my view is that we're going to have to develop effective new planning institutions. Now, India is in the process of both dismantling and recreating its planning institutions. The United States even farther behind, because we don't have any planning institutions at the federal level in the United States. We don't have a current or past planning ministry or planning commission. We even lack the basic instruments for that kind of long-term forward thinking. But my plea to India and to Kerry, which is one of the great intellectual centers for India, is to think hard and seriously about how to take goals like the Sustainable Development Goals, which have it horizon up to the year 2030, or how to take the Paris Climate Agreement, which really call on us to plan an energy trajectory up to the year 2050 beyond, and find serious analytical and intellectual approaches, mobilizing the best of India's minds, which are the best minds there are, on how to form pathways to success for these objectives, and then how, in a complex federal system like India's, to put these into application. If India can come up with successful models, I think that the inspiration for the rest of the world will be extraordinarily powerful. We need to see both India and the United States, in China, in the European Union, in the other major regions of the world, and in the African Union as well, long-term pathways that are consistent with the goals that we've set, that are mutually consistent on an international basis, so that the great regions of the world are in harmony on basic strategies, and in which these strategies really add up and help us to achieve the global goals. This work has not been done, unfortunately. If one asks today in India or the United States, what is the plan to achieve SDG 3 in India or the United States on universal health coverage, or SDG 4 on universal access to education, or SDG 13 on decarbonizing the energy system, my experience is we would not find an answer to that question. My challenge, therefore, to you, and I believe it's the world's challenge, is to answer effectively the question, what are the plans and pathways for success for the goals that we have set? What are the long-term trajectories that can meet success in a technological, financial, and organizational manner? And in what ways our national governments, our federal governments, adopt these strategies, impart them to the states, because both India and the United States and other large regions in effect have federal systems, and assure our citizens and the people of the world that we are on a trajectory of success. We're 1 year into 15-year sustainable development goal process, and we're not at that point being able to point to the strategies and trajectories that can give us confidence that we're on course. We are 1 year to the Paris Agreement. We've experienced, once again, the hottest year in instrument record. Devastating threats of climate change lie ahead, but we don't yet have in India or the United States or China or Europe clear pathways to success as well. I believe that at the core, this is an intellectual challenge to have the best minds in the world working on the problem of feasibility, design, and planning for success of these goals. At COP, let me conclude on the anniversary of the Paris Summit. The government of Morocco and the organization that I lead for the United Nations, the Sustainable Development Solutions Network, together with the World Business Council on Sustainable Development, will be hosting a unique conference called the Low Emissions Solutions Conference, where for 3 days we won't have diplomats in the room, we won't have lawyers in the room, we won't have negotiators in the room. We will have world-leading engineers in the room talking about the technological pathways to achieve the sustainable development goals and the Paris Climate Agreement. And interestingly, you will not be surprised to know among the lead engineers who will be in the room will be India's engineers, because it just happens that when you look to the world's leading energy engineers, you inevitably go first to IIT graduates. It's just an accident, but it's a reality. And so this conference will be bringing together thought leaders and engineering leaders to map out the technological possibilities ahead. But I believe it's just one example of what we need to do, because the energy challenge, though extraordinarily complicated, is just one part of our overarching sustainable development agenda. And in each of the critical areas that I've mentioned, in health, in education, in infrastructure, in climate, in urban design, we face the basic fundamental challenge of mobilizing our best thinking, best technologies, long-term planning, and democratic participation to make real what we have set out to do. I'll just conclude where I started. There's a reason that 193 member states, India, the United States, China, the European Union, Russia, the Gulf countries, the African Union countries, and the rest, all agreed a year ago on the Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Climate Agreement. They did not agree unanimously out of a light heart or as a pleasantry. These were hard negotiated agreements. But the world reached unanimity because of urgency, because is overwhelming evidence that we have no more time to lose, that our old ways of economic development were so socially stabilized and so environmentally unsustainable that we cannot continue with business as usual. So don't take the unanimity as a measure of complacency or ease. In my view, the unanimity is a signal of urgency. In a world that agrees on very little, the world has agreed that sustainable development is our most urgent challenge. And now it behooves us to put our best minds to work to find real and practical solutions to achieve these goals. And one of my great honors in speaking with you is to know that India has a unique role to play in this and unique intellectual leadership to offer to the world. And I thank you for that. And I thank you for the chance to be with you today to share these ideas.
Thanks very much indeed, Professor Jeffrey Sachs. Now, Dr. Mathur.
I think it has been a brilliant overview of both the challenges as well as what he said of inventing our way forward. I think it's something that we can take with us. There will be many, many instances around the world of inventing our way forward. I hope that this summit can become a place where these various things can be brought together, we learn from each other, and create new partnerships. Professor Sachs, I'm going to keep you to your promise of being here next year and the year after that. And what I would like to do is to request you to do a State of the SDGs address at the inauguration of the next WSDS.
Bravo, we're in agreement, and thank you.
Again, with many, many thanks and apologies for keeping you out of your pajamas so long. It has been an honor for us to have you with us. Many thanks for sharing your thoughts. Good night.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Good night.